This is the hottest topics. There's so many new advancements in medicine today.
So when we produce more growth hormone internally, we get better sleep, we have more energy, we have more collagen production, which leads to better hair, better skin.
The goal in TRT is not just to get you to a certain level, but also to optimize how the testosterone is working in your body.
Changing cortisol levels, we're changing everything.
What happens when some of the brightest minds in health and wellness across the Inland Empire sit down at one table? You get a rare, inside look at where the future of medicine is headed. In today's episode, we're joined by Nicholas, the founder of Peak Performance Health and Wellness, alongside Ashley, board-certified physician assistant, and Dr. Stephen Patterson, medical director. Together, we explore the three hottest breakthroughs in the medical world.
TRT is testosterone replacement therapy.
GLP-1, it does actually control the hunger system in the brain with the hypothalamus.
Your body produces peptides from the beginning of your stages of life until you die.
This podcast is not only for men. Ashley, let's talk about women and their hormone optimization. Today, I'm joined by the dream team for health and wellness in the Inland Empire, Peak Performance Yucaipa. Welcome to the show. Today, we have three of the hottest topics in medicine today. We've got testosterone and hormone optimization. We've got peptides and regenerative medicine. And of course, we've got the GLP-1 and weight loss treatments, which I am a customer of or a patient for. I don't know which one is more correct.
Oh, yeah.
And these are the topics on everybody's talking about right now. This is the hottest topics. There's so many new advancements in medicine today. But before we go into all of that, let's start by quick introductions, starting with you, doctor.
Well, I'm Dr. Stephen Patterson, and I'm an emergency physician by training. I've been practicing in the Inland Empire for 30 years now. And through my experience in emergency medicine, I pivoted into emergency medical services and began working with various agencies from first responders, disaster, and law enforcement. Became a law enforcement deputy, reserve deputy myself, and then began working with phases of law enforcement. And through that, got involved in working with aviation and then with special weapons and tactics, our specialized enforcement team. So there you're surrounded by a lot of people who are very preoccupied with health and wellness. It's part of their job and part of their survival.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for coming. What about you, Ashley?
Yeah, my name's Ashley Navarrete. I'm a board-certified physician assistant. I've been a PA now going on almost 9 years. So it's been a long time now. Time flies. But the past about 6 years, I've actually specialized in hormone replacement therapy, wellness, anti-aging medicine. Prior to this, I was doing a little bit of allergy and immunology medicine, which was great, but I kind of plateaued with my passion for it. And then over time, I kind of really wanted a source of medicine that's going to get down to the root of people's most common symptoms that they may have. And then going through school during my training, I really didn't want to be stuck in a clinic, a family medicine practice, or internal medicine practice where they're just giving a prescription medication for hypertension, diabetes, depression, anxiety, but they're not getting down to what is really causing it at a cellular level. So that's why I kind of joined hormone therapy and kind of got into this field of medicine.
That's awesome. And last but not least, Mr. Nick.
My name is Nick Tollefson. I currently work for San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. I've been working with Dr. Stephen Patterson on our SWAT team for about 13 years. We met him a long time ago. I'm pivoting to, potential new career with Peak Performance. I got lucky to have both Dr. Patterson and Ashley were available, and they chose to take a chance with Peak Performance.
Awesome. Well, let's dive right in at testosterone and hormone therapy. First of all, I'm curious. When we talk about hormone optimization, are we talking only for men or is it also for women too?
With the females, the hormones are a little bit more tricky and complex, I would say. Couple more moving parts versus the men. Typically progesterone, estrogen, and then women also produce testosterone. So we are balancing those hormones as well. Typically with the men, it's a balance between testosterone and estradiol. I would say those are the main players with the men.
Okay, TRT, doctor.
So TRT is testosterone replacement therapy. And what you're functionally doing is you're replacing what you're losing. So what we know, and we hadn't really had not a lot of experience with this in, 40, 50 years ago, but through a number of studies, particularly the Traverse trial, we began to see that there is a steady state loss of testosterone as we age. And you're looking at a roughly around a 1% or so per year. Now, you take an individual who is in their 20s and you're starting out, you've got a pretty decent amount of hormone level that you can work with, and it's functioning for your body. But as you reach your 30s and 40s and you begin to see that natural decline, symptoms begin to happen, which you may not necessarily equivalate with what's happening with your testosterone levels. What we've now begun to realize is that testosterone is a major factor in that decline, those symptoms that you're having. And so our purpose is to replace that testosterone and bring you back to that 20-year-old sort of vitality that you enjoyed and you want to get back to.
And who is it for specifically? Anybody? Is there an age limit, or what can you say about who is it for?
I would say our most common population that we are treating is usually men in the early 40s. That's typically where we see kind of that drop off is more steep with the symptoms that they start to experience, whether that's low sex drive, poor energy levels, poor sleep, depression, anxiety, moodiness. So I would say that's the most common.
What about people as muscular as Nick? Does it help with muscles, Nick?
Yeah, I think it helps a lot with that. I think it depends on every different person. We've had people in their 50s and 60s, and we test them and they come back 1,000. So there's genetics there. Sometimes they're just missing something else. Maybe it's something else in their diet or their life. But it puts you back in your 20s, so you were still growing then. So it gives you the opportunity. Tell people it opens doors. Doors close as we get older, and they ask, "What can I do for me?" Well, do you want to run marathons? Do you want to lift more weight? It's just opening those doors that closed, and we're opening them up again, and then you could choose which way you want to go.
Yeah. That's one of the important things when you're looking at testosterone replacement therapy is the therapy a formula approach or is it individualized to you? And what Nick's saying is it's much better to ask the questions right out of the gate. How's your sleep? What are your energy levels like? What's your vitality like? And in some cases, when you're talking to your primary care doctor, you don't get so comfortable talking about your sex drive. I think it's an embarrassing topic for a lot of people. And here, you're really coming to us specifically to address issues with your sex drive. This may be impacting your libido. And even if you get a return in your results that show that you're at a reasonably good or normalized level for testosterone, you may be running a higher sex hormone binding globulin. You might be not necessarily converting or using. You might have some issues with androgen receptors. And so the goal in TRT is not just to get you to a certain level, but also to optimize how the testosterone is working in your body.
Very cool. And I'm assuming that people are listening and saying, okay, well, this is too good to be true. So what are the drawbacks? What are some risks that we can talk about?
Yeah, I would say with the risks that are potentially there, we do cover our kind of bases for ourselves and the patient with the routine blood work that we do run. So usually after a patient does start therapy with us, we'll get a blood panel about 3 months, kind of check in, see how the blood work is going, see how the patient is feeling. And then after that, we will continue to monitor those labs routinely. It is very important that we do monitor things like hemoglobin, hematocrit. Those two values, essentially, I explain to the patient, kind of entail the thickness of the blood in kind of layman's terms, but you never want those values to become too elevated because in theory and kind of textbook is I would think you would agree, right? It's kind of still, it's a gray area, but you don't want your blood to become too thickened for risk of cardiac events, strokes, clots, things of that sort and that nature. And then we also monitor the prostate specific antigen to make sure there's no prostate cancer developing. Testosterone therapy doesn't cause prostate cancer, but if you were to develop it while you're currently on TRT, it could potentially accelerate the growth of it. So
Correct. Absolutely. And that's a very important thing for people to understand, is that the testing before you start TRT and consultation and discussion with someone who is knowledgeable on this is very important. You don't want to try to engage in this on your own. It's not something that you'll be able to fully recognize what your risks are. Liver function can be impacted if it's not properly dosed and corrected and monitored for you. You can impact your skin health, and acne can develop if you're running too high. You may not get an optimal dosing that even benefits you. And of course, as Ashley mentioned, your blood count. If your blood counts go over a significant number, then that can increase your risk of stroke and can increase your risk of cardiac events. And so, while that sounds really scary, I think if you are in good hands and you're being monitored in the appropriate fashion, then your risk is very low. And in fact, one major study that looked at individuals on testosterone replacement therapy, the risks were not impacted at all for major cardiac events. And this is very encouraging for us. And it's also a motivating factor for us to give the best care to our patients, that we monitor them closely.
And that's probably why, it's good to work with a team like Peak Performance, where we will get to be monitored and supervised, right? So what's, Nick, that's the monitoring part, how is it managed by you guys?
Sure. So a lot of people ask questions like, they ask the symptoms and how do I not get these? And how I explain it to them is, we have a protocol. We contact you, talk to you on a monthly, every couple month basis. And as long as you follow those guidelines, the symptoms are generally for people that don't follow the guidelines. So when they initially start, we get their baseline labs. That gives us the baseline testosterone, hemoglobin, prostate, estradiol. From there, Ashley is able to diagnose them to see if they're going to convert to estrogen. Some people could come back with a higher than 3 to 6% estrogen testosterone ratio. And then we already know, okay, they're going to convert. So we're going to start them on an estrogen blocker. So right off the bat, a good baseline is going to let us see the future. So that comes back with the hemoglobin. Some people have hemochromatosis naturally. Some people have, thin blood naturally. So once we develop that baseline, we might tell them, hey, within 30 days, it'd be best for you to donate whole blood, versus if their hemoglobin's 13, you're probably going to feel better on the treatment because it's going to increase your iron. It's going to make your blood actually at the level it should be at. So on the 14th of this month, on Saturday, every 3 to 4 months, we host a blood drive at our location through live stream. So I try to make it as convenient as possible, as easy as possible, so they don't have to go to a secondary location. They could just come to our town. They're already customers. And then some people actually get like college credit for it, some students. So we monitor all three. And then every time we talk to them, we'll ask them follow-up questions. Here, are you experiencing this? How's this going? And then we do labs every 3 to 6 months. Ashley usually gets it pretty good the first time, but we get that labs 3 months later, and then we see where they're at and if that's where she was aiming for. Kind of like Doc was talking about, I call it the sweet spot. You have to stay right within the ranges of all three. If your estrogen's too high, testosterone doesn't work. Estrogen's too low, testosterone doesn't work. Blood's too thick, testosterone doesn't work. So if you get them all dialed in, that's when you get the sweet spot.
And what people can expect. Let's say I'm started tomorrow on TRT. What things I'm gonna see in my life changing? Given that I'm someone who's so big on supplements, but supplements keep on failing to deliver. Like, they promise the world, but then you take them and you don't even notice anything different. So how is TRT like any different from all of that good stuff?
Tremendously. And you kind of gave a phrase in your intro in that question, in that it's life changing. I think that's probably what a lot of people say after they've had their experience. When they begin to feel the effects of their testosterone getting back to their normalized levels where they need to be, then they begin to feel more energy. They begin to have more mental focus. They begin to have more clarity. And they begin to feel more energized. And so, They begin to have an increase in their libido. And it might be that they had some suppression of their libido, and now it's back to where they felt it always should be. Their ability to kind of function on a daily basis, their sharpness and ability to think clearly improves. And then, of course, there's also that ability to get better sleep. Some of the times that we talk to people that are experiencing low testosterone, they're also describing that they're having sleep disturbances.
Right. And now by this time, probably women are started to doze off. This podcast is not only for men. Ashley, let's talk about women and their hormone optimization. What can you say about that?
Yeah, peak performance with the woman, they basically go through a similar kind of intake as the men. So we do get baseline labs kind of showing their hormonal levels. And us women during different stages, whether it's perimenopause, postmenopause, menopause, those hormones are constantly fluctuating. And I would say a lot of the women, especially at peak performance, were able to optimize testosterone in particular, as well as progesterone. And that has been life-changing for a lot of our women patients.
What do women experience after they are on the
Yeah, so with the testosterone, if that comes back low, then we would start the process of replacing that hormone specifically. And typically the women that are deficient in testosterone, they have low libido, so kind of like the men, low sex drive, low muscle mass, problems putting on muscle mass and gaining strength, and then also poor sleep habits. So I would say those are kind of the big three symptoms we see with women with low testosterone
and
levels.
do they have to all be present?
No, no. And that's kind of the amazing thing and very unique thing about hormone therapy. You could be deficient in a certain hormone. You may present with one symptom. You may have all of them. So everyone's case is a little bit different.
What is peptides?
So peptides are they're a chain of amino acids, and they can range from one amino acid is just an amino acid. 2 amino acids is a peptide. And in the space that we work in, it's around 2 to 50 amino acid chains. Now, your body produces peptides from the beginning of your stages of life until you die. And probably the most common peptide that everyone should be familiar with is insulin. That's a peptide. Growth hormone, that's a peptide. Now, those peptides are significantly longer than the ones that insulin is 51 amino acids, but growth hormone and such, those are longer, larger peptides, and they have more profound effects systemically. But these peptides are smaller. They're easy to get into your system. They impact at the cellular level by binding to receptors on the cell and then stimulating the cell to do what you want it to do. So if you're looking for that peptide to adjust your hunger or your satiety, then it will have that impact on that, but not on any other systemic aspects in the sense that insulin might have. And then, of course, because they're smaller peptides, they're broken down a lot faster. Your body is going to break down anything that it produces and recycle it. Very efficient that way. And what it then does is it allows for you to be able to control that dosimetric effect, that ability to give yourself a dose, get the effect, and then it tapers off into the point that you are ready for that next dose, and you continue to stay in that sweet spot, like Nick mentioned.
Right. So they are transmitters. Is that an accurate description? They send a signal to something to function in a better way.
They sort of function in that way, like a signal. So, for instance, if you talk about the most popular peptide in our current time is GLP-1. That in and of itself binds to receptors, and then it has the ability to signal a change within the cellular functions. So that's exactly what you're.
And what do we need them for? Can inject them into our bodies as well, like as a supplement? Or
Correct. Yes. So, GLP-1, household name now. We definitely naturally produce it. And then we also synthetically created GLP-1 in the form of semaglutide. That was kind of our first GLP-1 product that we produced pharmaceutically. And the GLP-1 has many different functions in the body. So it does actually control the hunger system in the brain with the hypothalamus. And when that GLP-1 is basically used, it really blocks food noise. So when that food noise is suppressed, your appetite is suppressed, and then weight loss is able to more easily occur. So it also does that. Secondly, it actually tells the stomach to actually hold on to food longer, and it delays gastric emptying. So the food is staying in your stomach much longer than before. So it's also helping with that hunger and the, feeling full sensation. And then lastly, it actually does tell the pancreas to regulate your insulin and blood sugar control more efficiently.
Is this new medicine or this has been for a while?
So the science has been around, but it has not been fully understood, not necessarily in how peptides impact the body, but in how we can really harness the utility of peptides for very specific and focused efforts like weight loss, weight management, things of that nature, growth, building your muscles and even your vascular system. These are all aspects that can be managed by peptides to the degree that you want them to be. Recovery from injury, all of those things can be managed by peptides. But these are things that, back in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, we knew about peptides, but we didn't really know exactly how they fully impacted in that circuitous process of communicating with the brain, communicating with cells, the impact of the release of the hormones from those cells and how those can impact cellular function, body function. Now that we have a better understanding, now we can say, okay, now let's take these peptides and let's harness that knowledge and allow people to be able to achieve a goal, if it's weight loss or if it's building your strength in your muscle or if it's recovery.
And are these like FDA approved? What can you say about that, Nick?
So some of them are, some of them are not.
Okay.
Like you said, they've been around forever. Some of them that have been studied are, you might see something on the FDA not approved list one day, and then the next day it's approved. There's a lot to that. There's a lot of politics to that. But when we talk about peptides, the easiest way I explain to people is two that we know in our body is creatine and collagen. Those are peptides. A lot of people will take creatine, a lot of people will take collagen. Well, they're peptides. We've been taking them for years. We just didn't know that's what they were called. And then there's several thousand of them out there. I've taken maybe 100 of them. So, if a person's injured, okay, that's for this. If the person wants to lose weight, that's for this. Okay, sleep, hair, skin, libido, they're all most of them are all natural. Your body produces them. It's just a matter of what do you need.
We're going to come back to the weight loss part. I just want to know what other symptoms that peptides could be used for besides weight loss.
I would say a very popular peptide that we do use would be Semaglutide. So to patients, I kind of describe that's like an overall wellness peptide, does a little bit of everything. So it tells the body to actually stimulate its growth hormone receptors. So when we produce more growth hormone internally, we get better sleep, we have more energy, we have more collagen production, which leads to better hair, better skin, more lean muscle mass, lower body fat. So for the patients that are looking for improvement with just overall wellness, then those are usually something like the Semaglutide that I would recommend for patients. So they would use it for that.
It looks like a dream coming true for a lot of people. Can these peptides work well with the testosterone replacement therapy or with the hormone optimization part that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, and in fact, that's sort of a multi-phase approach to getting to this sense of holistic wellness. You have symptoms and you're trying to approach a certain goal. Maybe that is to get better sleep, or maybe that is because you've begun to notice that your vitality is decreasing. Testosterone may be a component of repairing that, replacing that, or resolving that issue. But in addition to that, you want to be able to have some way to continue and maintain that process. So a peptide like a GLP-1, which as we began to understand what it could do on one level, we began more studies and we began to see that it also impacts longevity. It impacts cardiovascular health. It impacts renal function and renal health. It impacts your nervous system and your ability for maintenance of clarity and slowing down the development of Alzheimer's. And so at that point, this is something that you don't necessarily get that as a side benefit from testosterone, but you can get that from a peptide like GLP-1.
And speaking to the elephant in the room, weight loss, right? GLP-1. So the first time I've heard of Ozempic through a book called Outlive by Peter Attia. We were driving to Vegas, and on the way we were listening to that book, and he was talking about Ozempic. I think Ozempic now is one out of many options that people have. I know that we are on tirzepatide and we love it. But what are the different substances that are related to weight loss and what the differences are between them? Who want to take it?
I can jump in on that. Dylan.
Yeah.
So there are many different GLP-1s. And first thing to know is that the original purpose, I think, pharmaceutically for GLP-1s being brought out as its own product was for to manage patients that have diabetic symptoms. They may have issues with maintenance of their hemoglobin A1C, which is it's a measurement that we use to determine how severe your diabetes is, the progression of the disease itself. And what we found is that in those patients that were taking the GLP-1s, they had weight loss. Wow, this is a very interesting thing, and minimal side effects. So now, is it possible that we can approve the use of a GLP-1 specifically for that purpose and not necessarily for our patients that have diabetes? Well, in order for the FDA to approve that, you need a study. And the study demonstrates a low risk profile with a high gain or a reasonable gain, and then it can become approved. And that's really sort of how semaglutide became Wegovy. And then Wegovy was approved specifically for weight loss. Now, for semaglutide, never having done that study on that, it's the same protein. It is the same peptide. However, it was never directly studied under that name, so it was not approved by the FDA specifically for weight loss. But tirzepatide was. And so when you look at tirzepatide and semaglutide, they're a slightly different peptide, slightly different length. But the difference is that whereas semaglutide works specifically on one phase of your weight loss control, tirzepatide has a dual phase. And because of that, when the studies came through for tirzepatide, you began to see that patients had a higher degree of weight loss percentage-wise than they were just on semaglutide alone.
And semaglutide means Ozempic or no?
Semaglutide is Ozempic. So Ozempic is a name that is created by the pharmaceutical company that is marketing semaglutide. Now, it's the same medication. So think of it this way. You go to Costco and you buy ibuprofen.
Right.
It's ibuprofen. Or you
Or
can
Advil or Tylenol.
Yes, or you can buy Advil, and it's Advil. And sometimes people get confused and don't realize that is exactly the same medication.
Exactly. Okay, so what are the options? We have these are the only two options when it comes to weight loss?
There are additional ones that are under development that are still focused on sort of that dual cascade approach, but with perhaps a slightly lower risk profile in terms of development of nausea and some bloating and things like that some people may experience. And they have maybe a little bit of a longer effect. But overall, yes. In today's times, we really kind of talk about the two big ones. So semaglutide, tirzepatide.
Tirzepatide. I have a funny experience with tirzepatide is that we call it the rotten egg brand.
Yes.
So what is that? Like, what's the like? What it's what, how does that happen? Like, is it part of the function of the med?
So medically, what's happening? Ashley talked about how one of the primary effects of semaglutide and tirzepatide too is to slow down gastric emptying. Now, in order for your body to break down proteins, break down the components of whatever you eat. It produces acids, and those acids may contain sulfur. Now, because you're breaking down and you're keeping it longer in the stomach, then that sulfur is going to diffuse into the gases that's in your stomach. And then when you have a belching moment, then you may release some of that sulfur. And that sulfur has a characteristic ratnik.
Chemical weapon.
Yes, absolutely. You can tell. I know you're on semaglutide. I
Right.
can smell you.
Yeah. What are some benefits, Nick? What do you think some of the key benefits that people are coming to you and say,
One of the big benefits is the inflammation. You'd be amazed of on top of the weight loss, but inflammation's down. It's very easy to go into a fast when you're on a GLP. Granted, you should eat protein, you should eat the right things, but you can do 18-6 or 16-8 very easily. And then inflammation goes down tremendously. We've seen it where people reach their goal weight-wise, but they want moderate low doses just for the inflammation alone. It does help a lot with cognitive. It does help a lot with memory. Exactly what Dr. Patterson was talking about. How I explain it to people is if you have acids in your stomach that dissolve food and digest in 4 hours, they're okay with certain foods you're taking now. But when they stay in your stomach for 8 hours, maybe that salsa or that spicy food or that, for me, it was tomatoes. I never had a problem with tomatoes ever. And then I do the GLP and all of a sudden I'm burping stuff up and I got acid reflux. My body was okay with 4 hours, but once the food stayed in there longer, no tomatoes. And then you kind of learn your own body. There's certain things, alcohol, if you have strong alcohol, you'll probably do that once or twice. And then you'll probably end up throwing up if your stomach's not okay with that strong alcohol being in your stomach for 8 hours. But the benefits are phenomenal. I mean, if you take 20 pounds off a person with a bad back, well, guess what? Their back doesn't hurt. And now they're able to do exercises they couldn't do, and then there's the cortisol levels. People reach their goals. What we try to say is I try to do 5-pound goals. Instead of 30 pounds, let's do 5-pound increments. Reach that 5 pounds, and then they start to feel better. People start to notice it, start to tell them, hey, you look better. Well, now if we're changing cortisol levels, we're changing everything.
you're so right about this. Like, I feel like tirzepatide is like a big brother. Hey, don't eat that because you're going to suffer afterwards. So, Ashley, what are some of the foods that if you're on tirzepatide, you should never touch?
Yeah, I would definitely say any food that's going to kind of trigger the acid reflux, so typically are spicy, as Nick mentioned, the alcohol, chocolate is a big one, citrus fruits, things like that. So typically I say stay away from the acid reflux triggers that are kind of naturally acidic. But the foods to kind of you want to eat, or I guess so, as far as stay away as well. Staying away from the greasy food, the processed foods, those are definitely going to cause some stomach upset. They can cause diarrhea, vomiting, things of that sort. And then we really emphasize a high protein diet when you are on any sort of GLP-1 therapy because we want you to really keep that muscle mass on you.
Yeah.
Because God.
I need my wife to hear you very well because I've been following her, telling her, hey, don't forget protein.
Yes.
She tend not to, and this is, I think a lot of people might be facing something like that. They're not used to eating, prioritizing protein in their diet. And now they are on these medications and they don't have a lot of food anymore. And so how can we prioritize protein in our diet? Is there like any practical ways to do it?
Usually say it's okay to do a protein shake or supplement. Typically a good complete protein shake that has all the essential amino acids in it. That is super important. But that will usually give them a good chunk of their protein goal for that day. Usually we have patients aim for about 1 gram of protein per pound of their goal body weight. So a typical protein shake or supplement is going to give you about 30 grams or so. But chicken, beef, lentils, nuts, things like that. We kind of go through the certain food groups, yogurt, cottage cheese, that do have the higher protein count in that.
Right. And what are the risks? Is there any risks that you've heard of, doctor,
With regard to
with the weight
Snake.
loss?
Well, probably the biggest concern that people have and that we see in the medical community is protein wasting. So as a person continues to stay on a semaglutide program or a tirzepatide program, if you're not managing your protein intake very well, then you will begin to scavenge your protein stores, so your muscle, and you kind of develop what they call sort of that Ozempic face, and your total bulk of muscle mass will begin to decrease. And so that's one of the big things, and it's one of the reasons why we push protein intake as a big factor. Not just because we want to get people to stay on a healthier diet, one that will maintain and or even increase their metabolic rates, but also because we know that with the use of semaglutide or tirzepatide, your protein metabolism may increase as well. And so if you want to stay ahead of that curve, you have to increase your intake.
What about workout? I know, Nick, you work out a lot, obviously.
When we talk about GLPs, the key word I like to use is a kickstart. Hey, this is just to get you kickstarted at a good rate, and then these healthy habits, such as working out, walking, these routines, you don't want to be on it forever with us or in general, unless you absolutely have to. You want it to get you up to speed, create those healthy habits, and let the habits take off and let the habits become your lifestyle. If it starts off with walking, then jogging, maybe weightlifting, but you add those in the program on top of the protein. So we break down the 3 different types of proteins. I'll break down whey, isolate whey, and casein. And I'll explain the best ones, when to take them, how they work. And I'll explain you need the protein with the BCAAs, the branched chain amino acids, on top of obviously a lot of water when you're on the medication. But I let them know the more lean muscle you have when you get off this medication, the higher metabolism you're going to have. So if you pick up the workouts, the healthy habits, you physically shrink your stomach when you're on this, right? So your meals you're used to getting, well, you change your habits. Now you're getting smaller meals. So when you get off the medication and you've reached your goal, you let all the healthy habits that you've acquired along the way that we help you get. Working out's one. Maybe people don't have the time. Let's start with 1 day a week. And then you pick up all those healthy habits. And then when you decide you're ready to go, you just take your habits with you. And then that's the new you.
A lot of people are afraid that as soon as I stop that medicine, I'm going to gain all the weight back. Is that true?
It can be. If they do not implement those good habits that they learned while they were on the medication. So when they are on the GLP-1, we really want them to learn portion control, learn kind of how much food they should be eating with each sitting, and then also implement those good healthy habits with exercise and getting that movement in daily. Also, saying no to that food noise when those cravings kick in when they are off the medication is crucial to keep that weight off.
Yeah, there is a mental process that I think is beneficial. When you start the medication, you're kind of bringing in sort of I would say your baggage in a sense. These are the things that kind of led you to this point to where you feel the need to do something about your weight to manage it. And that baggage is what's been holding you back. It's slowing you down. Part of that is that food noise. It's that voice in the back of your head that says, I want this, I want this. And the other part of it is sort of your own personal joy, self-esteem, happiness, those kinds of things which can be impacted over years of not feeling the way that you want to feel, maybe not feeling like you're being viewed the way that you want to be viewed. Those kinds of things can have an impact on your mental health. However, as you begin to continue through the use and you get that joy back, people come to you and they say, wow, you look great. You're really changing. I love the way that what are you doing? Those kinds of questions that people get. It should also kind of inspire you to kind of stick with some of those important tips that we often give, such as portion control, such as being able to make good choices, getting 150 to 180 minutes of zone 2 exercise within a week time period. Doing those things on a continuous basis. Doesn't matter if you're on the semaglutide or not. The semaglutide, as Nick said, is going to kickstart you. It's going to get you to a point to where you're feeling good. you're in sort of an optimized mental state, an optimized sleep state, an optimized physical state to get to some of the exercises that you've been wanting to do without that fatigue, without the risk of injury. However, when you get to that point, you want to continue that process because those elements are just as therapeutic as anything else you're doing.
What results can people expect by when?
That's been the big question. It's been a lot of research that goes into that. I think if you were to ask one of the AI assistants, they'll give you a different answer from the other AI assistant. Most people can expect to see their full weight optimization. So if you say that you're taking semaglutide, the advertised weight loss on average is around 20% of your total body weight. Now, you don't really see that in the first month. You're not going to lose 20% of your body weight in the first month. Typically, it takes about 12 to 14 months before you're getting to that point to where you have realized that full potential. However, in the first week or two, you're going to begin to see maybe a 3, 4, or 5 pound weight reduction because you're doing a lot of things that you used to do in a bad way, but now you're doing it in a good way. And your body is responding to that very, very quickly and adapting. And then it's going to kind of reach this, what we call a homeostasis. And you're going to continue to push the things that we talk about, such as exercise, such as monitoring your food intake and dietary intake, avoiding certain toxins and things of that nature. Any of those things and focusing on your health. I think one of the things that is a real benefit to this process is that health kind of, instead of in your rearview mirror, it's kind of in your front windscreen.
100%. And I think 12 months is a long time. I personally reached my goals in the first 6 months on tirzepatide.
That's great. That is fantastic. And I think it's a testament to how different people can respond. When I say that 12 to 14 months, that is an average. And that's an average with people that are following the game plan and are doing all of the things that they're supposed to be doing, that they could be doing, optimizing. And then there are those that are just taking the medication and they're allowing for the medication's effects in and of itself to control the weight loss. So if you're just very kind of a hands-off person, expect that it will take longer for you to be able to get to your goals. If you are more aggressive and more focused on some of the advice, then you'll see much better results.
What happens if I take this for the rest of my life? Is this a bad thing? Do we have any research that says it's a bad thing or a good thing?
I don't think that there is a negative association to it. In fact, because of the research showing the impact and benefits on other areas of your body, not just weight, not just your total body mass, but also mental focus and clarity, your ability to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's, the improvements in kidney function, cardiovascular health. These are all things that have now started to develop pretty significant evidence to its benefit for GLP-1s. What we could say right now is that, yeah, you could stay on GLP-1s long term. Now, would you necessarily need to be maximizing the dose in order to do that? Probably not. It's not something that we feel would be necessary. However, there's still some more research that needs to be done to help us to determine what is the optimal dosing strategy. There are people out there that are getting a lot of success and still feeling very good and maintaining their weight loss on a microdosing strategy. And we talk about that in our clinic. We offer that as an option for people if they want to move in that direction. One of the things that may be challenging or daunting to people is the fact that you are dosing yourself once a week and you have to remember to do that. And I can tell you, as many fingers on my hand, 100 times that is the number of people that have completely forgotten that they went on vacation. They are doing things, life has taken over and they didn't get their shot. And so now what do? So that can become a challenge to have that responsibility on the regular, and going to a microdosing strategy may be a benefit for them as well.
What is considered a microdose?
I would say microdose typically means, medically speaking, a smaller dose of the normal medication starting dose, or even you could explain it in taking a weekly dosage and splitting it into halves, thirds. So the terms kind of mean a little bit different for what sort of therapy we were referring to. With the GLP-1 therapy for patients that are more so focused on long-term maintenance, typically it's about 70 to 80% of that base dosage is kind of what we're looking at.
Right. So it's not like a number like 2.5 or something. Because 2.5 to me might be microdose, to someone else it might be like
It's completely different depending on the individual, your response to it, if you're losing weight on it. If you're already at a healthy BMI, we don't want you to keep losing weight necessarily, but more so we want to control certain secondary symptoms like the inflammation, the brain fogginess, things of that sort, or just keeping you at that healthy sort of goal weight.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, 20% of someone's body weight, that's a dream coming true to a lot of people. Nick, I don't know if you want to talk pricing, but people are going to listen to this and say, I want this, but it's definitely expensive. It's definitely above my budget. What can you say about that?
So what we've noticed, and the easiest way to explain it, which is true, is we know people, we have customers, and people came to us and said they save money. So what it happens is, if your grocery bill and your going out to eat bill, let's say, is $800 a month, everything, right? All your groceries, all you're going out to eat. Well, just as an easy way to kind of look at it, you're consuming half the food. So you're not buying that big meal, or that big meal is lasting you the next day, or you're going to the grocery store and you're buying half the groceries. So literally you save money when you're on the medication, because you're not consuming as much calories, as much food as you did before. So if a person was to sit there, and I've been on both medications for over 2 years, and I've gone back and forth, and I've used myself as a guinea pig. I trying, different ways so I could learn the symptoms and side effects. And I looked at my bills before, and the amount I was paying for the medication, maybe as $280, $400, was always beneficial, and I would always save more than when I went out to eat. Uh, Both medications do take away the craving for alcohol. We have several customers who have stopped drinking alcohol because of it, and it's changing their life. We have 18 customers that are down 100 pounds, and they tell me it's changed my life. And that's a pretty cool thing when a stranger tells you you had an impact. But if you compare the price of something, what's the price of being healthy? What's the
Yes.
price of achieving your goals?
Absolutely.
When I bought supplements and I buy things for health, I want to get a good deal, but there's no price. It's your body. I mean, you can go out and spend money on something you'll have for a day or two. Well, this is with you forever. So you really have to weigh out the options and say how important this is. How many years could you gain living, and how much healthier can you be, and what's the price on that?
Yes. That's very profound. And I think it's something that um, should take away sort of that concern about, say, the cost of this, because in essence, it's like if you're a faithful gym member and you pay for that gym membership and you're going, gym memberships can be pretty expensive. But it's far more expensive to not have any type of support that improves your health. And just think of the cost of healthcare in and of itself. What is the cost of being on diabetes medication, or the cost of hemodialysis or heart disease, things of that nature? And that not just the cost financially, but the cost to your well-being, the cost to your ability and availability to your family and friends. These are all things that you can't necessarily put a monetary value on that, but it's very valuable. And I think when people are at their worst, they probably will tell themselves, and hopefully they would agree, that they would give anything to get back to that sense of being able to do the things that they used to.
Final words from you, Ashley, to the people listening. What is an advice that you could send to another woman or men? Let's talk about like in their 30s, 40s, 50s. What would you tell them right now?
That's a good question. I would say that now in the age of medicine that we are in, that it is very innovative, and we do have access to these tools that we didn't have access to 10, 20 years ago. And we should definitely use them if we're able to, because ultimately it improves our quality of life. It improves our relationships with our partner, our family, our kids. And if we're able to lead a healthier life, then we're only going to improve the wellness and joy of everyone around us.
Wonderful. And Nick, if people are listening and want to get in touch with Peak Performance, how can they do that?
Website ukaipapeakperformance.com is one way. Google, they could just Google Ukaipa Peak Performance Health and Wellness. Those are the two easiest ways. We're ranking decent on Google, so it should be an easy search, especially if you put Ukaipa in there. That's YUCAIPA, not Yucaipa.
Great having you. You dropped some really cool and a lot of insights. So we appreciate you coming through. And yeah, thank you.